Okay, let's do this. So of all the movies that I saw at the Toronto International Film Festival, nothing was more hyped or crazed over than Joker. And for good reason. He's an iconic villain, people are dying for DC to make something that doesn't suck. Joaquin Phoenix seemed to be born for the role, especially at this stage of his career. And the last Joker left people wanting. Ugh. But amidst this hype that's only been growing since the Venice Film Festival bestowed upon it the Golden Lion, what the hell is wrong with you Italians? Did you not watch Marriage Story? There's a lot of controversy surrounding it too, because everybody knows that movies are actually political statements. It's simultaneously the best and worst film of 2019. It's dangerous. It's too topical. America is literally losing its mind. Okay, no, wait, look, you can't be morally outraged over Joker and Jojo Rabbit at the same time. You have to pick one. Especially if you haven't seen either of them, you have to pick one. It's reigniting the Marvel versus DC feud, even though most people haven't even seen this movie yet because we can't just all get along. It isn't incel bait, but it's definitely incel bait. It's inciting moral panic, and unfortunately, at the end of the day, liking or not liking this movie is going to cause a lot of people to make very broad assumptions about you as a person. Because again, movies are clearly political opinions. But moral panic surrounding film is nothing new. This isn't going to be the first movie that gets criticized for it, and it's certainly not going to be the last. And while it can definitely be argued that these themes could have been handled better than they were in this movie, because a lot of the issues I have are surrounding the writing, it's important to remember that at the end of the day, it's just a movie! And that's not to take away from the effects that movies can have on people on a larger scale, but again, I think that some people are giving this a little bit too much credit. And I'll say that to both the weirdos that watch this looking for some kind of personal validation for their shitty ideologies, and for the people that seem to think it has the power to crumble society. Everybody just needs to calm down a little bit. Obviously, we are in a bit of a tense climate right now when it comes to a lot of these topics, and I can understand why people have a genuine concern for what's being expressed out there. I know you can say that with pretty much everything, but I think specifically with this movie, we're going to be seeing that behavior a lot more, both with valid concerns and not so valid concerns. Like, I feel like every day I see like 5 to 10 new articles just about the Joker, and I really don't see that slowing down as we amp into the release date. In fact, the family of the Aurora victims just sent a letter to Warner Studios expressing concern and urging the studio to end contributions to political candidates who accept money from the NRA, as well as other suggestions to reduce gun violence. Which honestly is better than just demanding that the whole movie be canceled, which seems to be a trend lately, because as I've said before, banning movies, video games, television shows, comic books doesn't actually solve anything and just detracts from finding real solutions. At the end of the day, we all just need to remember that it was written and directed by the same guy who came up with the Hangover movies.
Funny fat guy falls on face.
I don't think he had any kind of ulterior motives here. But with all that aside, how was it as a movie? Well, it was pretty good. And look, I'm not some kind of Marvel shill. But it was a solid movie. I don't think it's as amazing as some people are putting out there, but I do realize that a lot of people are going to find it that amazing just because of their love of the Batverse as a whole. It's easily the best thing that DC and Warner have put out since The Dark Knight. And let me just tell you, if you thought that the Marvel versus DC or the Snyder Cut debates were bad enough, just wait till the Ledger versus Phoenix debates start up. Dark Knight still takes the cake though. So putting aside all of the moral and social concerns, the movie is really enjoyable at its core. I feel like if you're really excited for this movie, you're definitely going to enjoy it. But on the flip side, if you're expecting it to be irresponsible with how it handles certain topics, that's probably what you're gonna get out of it. So it's certainly not the best movie of the year, but I think it's probably gonna go out being the most discussed movie of the year. And honestly, that definitely counts for something. So the things that really stand out in this movie are unequivocally Phoenix's performance and the score that accompanies his sinister behavior. The story itself really struggles to establish the tone it's looking for in terms of how audiences are supposed to sympathize with Arthur. And during the Q&A session that followed my viewing of the movie, Philip specifically said,
and you root for him until you can't root for him any longer. And that point is different for certain people, but you definitely, Arthur's actions in this movie are abhorrent by the end. You're not supposed to be rooting for him. There's a point, and it's different for everyone, where you're like, I'm out. But unfortunately, there are plenty of people that weren't at all repulsed at any point during this movie. My friends Art and Alina from the ATZ show and Let Me Explain are still shook up by people near them that were laughing at some of the most sinister and horrific moments. And for me, I think that comes down to a couple key moments in the movies not pushing things quite far enough.
And again, that really comes down to the writing. You can't have somebody like Joaquin Phoenix coming in and not have that clear moral grounding in the script for him to work with, because otherwise he's going to sell exactly what's on that page to the best of his abilities, and his best ability is pretty damn great. I think there's a couple of key moments in the movies where different things had to happen. Certain actions had to be committed by Arthur to really drive home that point that this is not somebody that we should be sympathizing with. This is a narcissistic psychopath demanding the attention of the world around him, and he's going to react in the worst possible way when he doesn't get it. And while it might not be a career best for Phoenix, all of the Oscar buzz around that performance is completely warranted. There's a vulnerability that he brings to the character while exuding that unhinged narcissism that just completely drives their performance, and it just locks you in. As the tensions continue to bubble and bubble, you as the viewer feel like there's no escape and you don't quite know when it's completely gonna burst. Again, on top of Joaquin's amazing performance, there's that soundtrack and the score that's just going behind him that just amplifies everything he's doing. It's always just there as the volume knob of his like unhinged behavior continues to grow. That soundtrack's right there bubbling along with it. So somehow a movie with like relatively predictable writing ends up creating scenarios where you're still shocked by what you're seeing on screen and should be horrified, but again, some people just aren't. This is a version of the Joker that's going to be discussed for years to come, much like we've seen with Ledger. And for better or for worse, this movie could have been about some random dude. Obviously, it wouldn't have gotten the same kind of attention and buzz if it was just about some random dude and not about one of the most iconic villains of one of the most iconic heroes, but it literally would have had the same impact story-wise, because anything that ties it into that larger like DC universe or like the Batverse and the Wayne family actually detract from it as a film. And that's where the story issues pop up. While a character study on popular villains is a great idea, in fact, when he approached DC and Warner about this idea, it was actually about a larger like DC Black, where it would be these just one-off character studies about iconic villains, always directed by somebody different, somebody who didn't usually handle this kind of subject matter, which I think is a great idea. But as good of an idea as it was, this still ended up with a lot of issues. I really don't like how much they tried to implement the Waynes into this story. Characters that weren't the Joker were oftentimes so poorly written that they just kind of came off as comical or cheesy. And it felt weird to have them sharing screen time with like the level of depth that Phoenix brought to his character. And then ultimately what I took away as my favorite part of the movie, Todd Phillips just ripped away from me during the Q&A session as something that wasn't even the intention of them when they made the movie. However, direction-wise, I actually liked how they handled it. I know some people had issues with how it was shot or like the color palette they chose, but I actually really liked that kind of like dark, gritty blue wash. I know that it is not at all new to the DC universe at this point, but they kind of changed it in the sense where like the vibrancy of the colors still managed to really stand out in the mix when it needed to, rather than the whole thing just coming across as dark and dingy and lifeless. And obviously this kind of color palette was designed for Batman and his rogue gallery of villains. The shots were used in a way that really amplified Phoenix's performance. Like they do these nice shots of his face where you could catch that glint in his eyes as his emotions were changing, which really just drove home his unhinged nature. It's nice that the cinematography worked with him in that sense. Though I will say that the King of Comedy comparisons are spot on. Their personalities are so similar. They have the same level of narcissism. They both kind of request how they want to be addressed on stage. They have monologues that focus on their own personal history. A lot of other things that kind of venture into the realm of spoilers, but it just hits a point in the Joker where it ramps up more, clearly. But even though there are a lot of similarities there, I really do like how that aspect of the story was implemented into the film. And if you haven't seen King of Comedy yet, I would definitely recommend giving it a watch, but maybe wait till after Joker if you've never seen it. So yeah, if you're a fan of the Joker, you're probably gonna like this. Hell, you might even love it. But now we're gonna get into some spoilers. So if you don't want any spoilers to this movie in the slightest, click forward to this moment in the video just to kind of get my last little conclusion and thoughts. So again, spoilers. So the way they implement the Waynes is so bad that it's just annoying. So at first it's not too bad. So there's that scene from the trailer where the three guys are beating him up that ultimately ends with him shooting and killing them with a gun that he got from a coworker because he's not legally or admissibly allowed to have a gun. People thought that it was some kind of political statement against the socioeconomic discourse in Gotham City between the rich and the poor. And Thomas Wayne, being their employer, obviously made a lot of statements saying that this was like a cowardly act of somebody just snuffing out the lives of people that had so much going for them. And if they had just stuck it to here, it wouldn't have been that bad. But unfortunately, it just keeps going and actually starts to paint Thomas Wayne as a complete dick, which is never really the case. The story completely loses it for me when they try to add in the fact that, Arthur is the product of an affair between his mom and Thomas Wayne. Now, ultimately, it turns out that that wasn't the case and that his mom was just a little bit insane, had adopted him, and now had the delusion that Thomas Wayne was the father. It was still a really weird direction to go in and ultimately took away from the story. And then it becomes even worse as it descends into the finale of the movie where the Joker has started a mass riot with his actions, and it was in fact one of these people that was inspired by him that goes down the alley and kills the Wayne family. Who the fuck okayed this? And that ties into what my issue with the ending ends up being. So early on, we are given the information that he most likely has delusions. So when he starts a relationship with someone like Zazie Beetz that just seems to be going entirely too well, it just feels too perfect. Like she goes to his comedy stand-up routine, which at first is going horribly, but then suddenly we're given the impression that it's going fantastically. And then even though she doesn't know it was him, she talks really positively about the clown that killed the 3 guys in the train, talking about how somebody was finally standing up to the injustices of Gotham City. So it's really no surprise that when he stumbles onto her couch, she seems genuinely confused as to who he is, and seems genuinely frightened that a grown man has stumbled his way into her apartment when she has a young child, and makes plenty of note to the fact that she doesn't really know who he is. He made the whole thing up in his head. And if you didn't catch this by the very obvious nature of the discussion they were just having, they are going to give you that Fight Club-esque reshoot scene where it shows all those moments where he was imagining them together, where it was actually just him alone all along. And that as a concept was actually a good idea. I think they did just spoon feed it to audiences a little bit too much at the end, but it was a good idea and it lends into the Joker mythos, which is why when the ending started circling through, I thought we were getting something similar. So after that riot scene is happening and all the people are cheering him wearing Joker masks and it does just seem like some crazy fantasy being lived out, it cuts to just the white room of him and Arkham laughing. And the psychiatrist across the table says, "What's so funny?" And he's like, "It's just a joke. You wouldn't understand." And in that moment, I was like, holy shit. He imagined the whole thing. None of this actually happened, and that actually plays in perfectly to the Joker and the entire idea of I prefer my history to be multiple choice. Because one of the main complaints about the Joker is that people don't want origin stories. People don't want to know where he comes from. One of the things that makes him the scariest is that we don't have an origin. We don't have a motivation. He's just this agent of chaos. But no, Todd Phillips ruined that for me in his damn Q&A session.
There are some people that watch this movie and think none of it happened. When he's in that white room at the end and she's saying, "What's so funny? It's a joke. You wouldn't get it." That he actually imagined the whole movie, and that's not even, Joker. And somebody said that to me, a friend of mine, a filmmaker who I showed it to. And I said, "Oh, that's interesting too." It's hard to do these because you don't want to define it for people.
Too bad, Todd. We're defining it. So yeah. It's a movie, and I think a lot of you are really going to enjoy it. It raises some really interesting questions on access to mental health care, socioeconomic standings, society as a whole, and I definitely recommend checking it out in theaters. I know I'm definitely going to be seeing it a second time. Was it my favorite of the festival? Absolutely not. Am I happy that I got to see it? Absolutely yes. So thanks to everyone who watched this video. I hope you do enjoy. Make sure to follow all my social medias. They're listed down below. It's all Amanda the Jedi. Subscribe and like if you're into that kind of thing. Let me know what you guys are thinking in the comment section down below. And as always, I hope you had a fantastic day, and we'll catch you all later.